friends. We find ourselves once again in a time of unrest in our nation. But in all truth, the nation has never been at rest, as racism has been part of the fiber of this country from the beginning. What we and our children need to understand is just because we are not personally faced with it every day, doesn't mean it's not there. As Reverend Kaufman saw pictures of my family standing in protest in Crozet just a few short months ago, she asked me to share how we have this conversation with our children in hopes that it may help others. My first thought was, are we doing this right? Or how do we have that conversation with our children? And why am I the one to share how to do it? But I shared my thoughts with Kelly after some personal reflection. And she shared that with families in the church with young children. And then when asked by Ed to share a reflection for the week, I thought this may be beneficial to other members of the church, especially now that the church is participating in the Beloved Community Initiative. There was never a defining moment where we had the talk about racism and social injustice with our children, just as there was never a defining moment for me as a child. I'm the daughter of a Presbyterian minister, a man who challenges social injustice and racism every day. I was given the name Martina in honor of the late Martin Luther King Jr., after my parents marched in the 60s for civil rights. They later put me on their shoulders as a young child to march in Washington, D.C. against apartheid. The list of marches and demonstrations I have attended continued from there. For as long as I can remember, I was taught to recognize the differences and embrace them. I was taught not to stay silent when any form of injustice or discrimination was witnessed. There was never a conversation that was had. It was just ingrained in me from the beginning through witnessing the actions of my parents. It became something organic to me, just like a child's growing understanding of God. This is the path that Zach and I have taken with our own children. It's been shown that babies recognize differences in people as early as 6 months of age. But how do you have a conversation about racism with a 6-month-old? Well, of course you can't, but you can model behaviors and speak about racism in your daily conversation. As children get older, this conversation becomes part of the normal dialogue. That dialogue will change as the child begins to age and can handle hearing more. As racial events become visible on television and within our own community, those conversations continue to happen on a level that's appropriate for the age of the child. But we don't overlook the one child from those conversations just because we think they're too young or in trying to protect their perfect world. The world is not perfect, and they need to know that, so they know how to be part of the change in their own way and in their own time. We want our children to recognize racism, discrimination, and social injustice in their everyday lives so that they can face and respond to it. Our dinners at night are not just opportunities to talk about our family's daily life, but we use them to discuss the world's events in a way our children understand. For Citily, we ask her if we should treat people with brown hair differently from those with red hair. We know Andy and Austin have had conversations at school or with their friends, so we ask probing questions to see what they've heard. From there, we try to help them develop their understanding of the subject. We don't ignore the news when the kids walk in the room. We sometimes turn it off, but the conversation continues. Every Friday in our house is movie night. And when it's parents' pick, we of course expose them to the classic movies like The Goonies and The Sandlot, but we also expose them to movies like 42, Glory Road, and Remember the Titans. While these movies may have some adult situations and language that may be less than ideal, we recognize that these movies illustrate the concepts that our children must see and be exposed to. We discuss the movie when it's over, and they understand much more than we give them credit for. If you're not quite ready to tackle Remember the Titans, start with Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood and explain to your children why Mr. Rogers dipping his feet in a pool with a black man was so profound. We teach our children that they are privileged, not because they live in a nice neighborhood, not because they get 3 meals a day, not because they want for nothing, but they're privileged simply because they are white. We teach our children that they will have friends who will live in fear every day of what might happen to them simply because of the color of their skin. It's easier to discuss privilege than one would think. We relate privilege to hair color, eye color, type of car. These are things that one has no control over, but it's used to describe them. We teach them that these descriptors should not be used as definers. We teach our children to speak up when they witness racism and discrimination because being silent is just as bad. We teach our children to learn about their friends of color, to ask the tough questions and embrace the differences. Hate comes from fear, and fear comes from what we do not know. We teach our children to see color and to love them all. We must never underestimate what our children can understand, no matter their age. Parents who have children of color have this discussion from day one to protect them. We must start early so our children can be their advocates. It is never too late to start. They see us, they hear us, and they're impacted by the world around them in ways we don't even know. We must talk about it in a way they can understand. We must show them through our own actions how to love our neighbors of all color. When we have the opportunity to march or protest with our children, for various reasons of racial, gender, or social injustices, we talk about it, we make the signs, and we stand with our brothers and sisters. If we don't talk about racism with our children, who will? Reflect on Isaiah 11:6 for a moment. The wolf shall dwell with the lamb, the leopard shall lie down with the young goat, the calf and the young lion and the fatling together, and a little child shall lead them. My parents marched in hopes that racism would end with my generation. And as I watched as they stood by their own grandchildren, protesting the same thing that they protested in the 60s, I realized that the dream has not been realized. We will continue to have those tough conversations and to be mindful that our children are always watching our actions. It's hard, and we in no way have the answers. We are far from doing it perfect. However, we feel that it is through those actions that maybe, just maybe, Zach and I will not have to stand beside our own grandchildren in protest.